Oh, Tryon Worlds, how we detested you so. And yet we find ourselves here again, covering yet another failed Tryon Worlds game. With us covering the likes of Rift, Arcade, and with yet many more to cover from Tryon Worlds, they're sort of a regular star on the Death of a Game series, a series where we diagnose the largest contributing factors to a game's death or demise utilizing a timeline of events and various clues collected along the way. Tryon might have had some high-profile failures, but they also have had some interesting titles, such as Trove, and what would sprout from that, and the creators of Trove, Atlas Reactor, the subject for this video. If you missed any of the clues along the way, don't worry, I will solve everything in the final deduction. You know, every detective's favorite moment of the mystery. Atlas Reactor might have only lasted a few years, but it has been listed and singled out as a unique title, one that garnered a loyal and cult following, which makes it worthy of being covered on the series, so we can tell its special story. Ready your board and strategic decisions, and let's tactical turn-based our way into this story. This video is sponsored by Monly, who is currently offering a fantastic 96% off lifetime access using the link on screen or in the description. Monly is a language learning app that gives you access to 41 different languages from 33 native languages, resulting in a total of 1,320 language combinations. So if you want to learn English as a Romanian or even less popular languages such as Catalan or Finnish, you can do so with the Monly app. Another great aspect of Monly is it utilizes real conversations with the help of a chatbot with speech recognition that can help you immediately. But don't worry, the lessons and audio material are recorded with native speakers to ensure authenticity. With the use of daily lessons and weekly and monthly quizzes, Monly focuses on practical lessons that you can actually use in your everyday life. At the end of each month, users can then take a quiz to recap what they have learned. Monly is currently hosting a summer sale, providing a 96% discount for lifetime access to all languages if you access the sale through the link on screen or in the description. Thank you to Monly for sponsoring this video and helping us pay our bills. Tryon Worlds, coming off the roaring success of Arcade, would announce yet another multiplayer title, this time venturing into the little-known and little-utilized tactical turn-based gameplay that series like XCOM made famous. There's also tactical turn-based style games like Final Fantasy Tactics, and my personal, lesser-known childhood favorite growing up, Tactics Arena. Atlas Reactor, as the title would be dubbed, was being advertised as designed by the Trove developers and dubbed a multiplayer turn-based tactics game. The gameplay would consist of 4 versus 4, where players attempt to win through battling through the tactical combat system. Each turn gives the players 30 seconds to decide their next move, which is taken by each player on their team simultaneously. Fog of war means you can't be sure what the enemy's next move will be, complicating your plans for how to deal with them. Matches are pretty short too, expected to last between 10 and 20 minutes. It's not a mystery that people were comparing the game to XCOM. I mean, I just did. But with a pretty big difference of the simultaneous play, which must be acknowledged. XCOM also was more about unified single-player story, or the whole unified threat of aliens and fighting against them, and being attached to the characters that you would create and customize. The point of contention here is that, well, because the game was single player, it actually allows the characters that you work with to die. It adds a certain level of replayability, as well as caring about your companions in their journey, since you're kind of a part of it all. It adds more immersion, and there's just less personal investment in a tactical multiplayer arena by contrast. Atlas Reactor closed beta took place in April of 2016, which purchasing a Founders Pack in Tryon fashion would give you access to. With the closed beta would be the introduction of some new features, a season progression system, and a spectator mode for 1 versus 1. And finally, 2 new freelancers, or 2 new characters, Elle the Enforcer and Oz the Trickster. Although Atlas Reactor initially was planning on being a free-to-play game, they would switch gears and go pay-to-play right before launch, priced at $30 instead, allowing you to unlock all the characters with that purchase. This was a big shift regardless, despite Tryon trying to tell people that they were never married to the business model in the first place. Some fans were already worried, as they preferred the title as a free-to-play game, especially since it would help with the player base. But Tryon, with their experience with MMOs, would actually think ahead of this. They would introduce a free-to-play mode where you could play the freelancers available free weekly. Still, even just having the price tag would serve as a barrier to entry. And with many people comparing Atlas Reactor to a MOBA as well, the expectation was that the game would be free, as originally promised. Atlas Reactor, developed in Unity by Tryon Worlds and self-published by the same name, would launch October 4th, 2016 on the PC. The unlikely turn-based tactical multiplayer game would score an impressive 81 out of 100 on aggregate review website Metacritic from 12 different critics. While Atlas Reactor didn't have a large critical reception, it was impressing the critics who did play the game largely. But something you have to be careful about is that sometimes games can impress critical audiences and fail to actually garner an actual playing audience. For example, on Steam, Atlas Reactor was able to peak at 15,000 players, which isn't necessarily bad for a niche title like Atlas Reactor, but you have to remember, the idea is that not many games were like Atlas Reactor, if any in a multiplayer context, which would be a good and bad thing going forward. GameSpot, who reviewed the game, would score Atlas Reactor a 8 out of 10 and state that they enjoyed the short but intense turn-based matches. The cast of 21 characters with unique abilities, and the buy-to-play model that allows for unlocking of everything on top of the free-to-play mode. I must note that they got the game for free because it's a review copy, so anytime any reviewer ever talks about this, they never really acknowledge the whole elephant in the room, which is that the majority of players don't get the game for free. What GameSpot disliked was how similar the maps were and how few in number overall. MMORPG would also review the title since many people were kind of comparing it to an MMO in a sense, scoring it slightly better at an 8.6 out of 10. They enjoyed the competitive but friendly community, the varied characters, the loads of customization, and the unique form of PvP that existed. MMORPG also acknowledged that the game could use more game modes, a replay system, and like GameSpot, also thought that the game kind of had a steep learning curve. That's because it requires a lot of prediction, and knowing what your opponent could or would do. Even more so than a game like XCOM, chess, or even most tactical arenas, because the moves are simultaneous. In a shocking turn of events, Tryon would liquidate in a sense and sell the rights and assets to none other than the European free-to-play publisher Gamigo. Tryon being a publisher as well would basically give Gamigo their unique IPs too. Tryon already learned from the Asian market how to monetize in many new ways and turn things up to the umpteenth level, which kind of brought a lot of their games crashing down. I talked about this in my Rift and Arcade video. With Gamigo in charge, things would only imaginably get worse. Gamigo is about as close as you can get to a gaming free-to-play mill, and when they have dipped their hands into things not free-to-play, it's never been ceremonious or even really moral. I personally worked with Gamigo for a campaign once and found them to be quite incompetent. They aren't, at least not really, but the only thing they are competent about is making money on online games by spending the least amount of money and work. Which is a fair business model, but I don't have to celebrate their position in the market, or celebrate the company, or pretend the acquisition was anything but negative for the existing Tryon Worlds IPs. 3 years after launching, and only 1 year after the Gamigo acquisition, an Atlas Reactor would be shut down. Gamigo seemed to be trimming the fat, and focusing more of their efforts on trying to reboot arcade servers before turning them pay-to-win again, the classic money-making strategy. No, that's actually a thing. Arcade would have 2 more revitalizations after Gamigo would acquire the rights in the West, and both were chock full of the same over-monetization that plagued the game before. Atlas Reactor, according to Steam charts in 2019, only had a few hundred players now, which wasn't enough to sustain an audience, especially one that was trying to push towards a competitive esports audience too, and especially for being newly acquired by a company notorious for trimming the fat. Simply put, Atlas Reactor, as explained in the press release, wasn't financially sustainable, and not many other reasons are needed to shut a game down from a business perspective. Gamigo felt like there was more to milk off the Atlas name, choosing to launch a cooperative roguelite dubbed Atlas Rogues. Or maybe it was just the previous devs trying to save the previous IP. Atlas Rogue was a PvE-focused Atlas World game. I don't know why they didn't just go by Atlas Reactor Rogues, but I digress. I guess the idea was that Atlas Reactor failed due to not being a PvE title, or at least having a single-player component, and perhaps if the Rogues would succeed at that, Reactor could still have another chance. But Atlas Rogues was not only clearly reusing assets from the previous game, it doesn't even look or feel that different either. Like some fans have been saying, Atlas Rogues felt like more of a mod for Atlas Reactor than a standalone game, which feels like a pretty low-effort way for Gamigo to try to cash in on an IP they probably paid some cash in for in the first place. Remember, they were charging for it. It's just hard not to see it as anything other than a way for them to make money off of an IP that they were probably going to expire soon. Especially when within just a year, the game would be abandoned according to an investor report, and like that, the Atlas name was finished. Both the tactical multiplayer version and the roguelite single-player version, making this sort of a 2-in-1 episode. Gamago would also squander the majority of other IPs they acquired too, sort of proving my point in previous videos that their greatest successes came from porting other people's games and thus other people's successes. With that music playing, we have gathered more than enough clues and bits of evidence to crack this case. Why did Atlas Reactor die? And well, if you weren't paying attention along the way, they had a tricky game design that was unlike many other titles. Not financially sustainable, period. There was sort of a non-existent market. Tryon lost reputation very quickly. It was a niche title. The business model switcheroo. Gamago would take over the reins, yikers. Atlas Reactor is a short story and a longer tale known as Tryon Worlds in their titles, but a story that further showcases the mistakes that Tryon and eventually Gamago have made and kind of would continue to make. Maybe that's just a guilty pleasure of mine not enjoying either company very much, but Tryon has moved on. Cash in hand, probably, and Gamago is still around doing Gamago things. So what changes? I think we see even more reluctance to make more tactical turn-based arena games, especially multiplayer ones, whether they be more XCOM or Final Fantasy-like, which is a shame because I'm very interested in this kind of game personally. But sometimes good ideas and fun games aren't sustainable, and not for larger than a small, niche audience. And depending on how much money is spent on the project and how it is sold, expectations included, niche just might not be enough, like it wasn't for Atlas Reactor. Until next time, detectives, thanks for watching.
It's happening right here, right now in Habbo Hotel.